Meeting is being recorded.
All right, I don't quite show 5 o'clock yet. So I was going to wait just another minute. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's time to convene the work meeting for Wednesday, May 26th of the Planning Commission. And I will begin by reading the chair's statement about Open and Public Meetings Act. In accordance with Utah's Open and Public Meetings Act, the chair has determined that conducting meetings of the Provo City Planning Commission with an anchor location, such as the council chambers, presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which he has made this determination. The World Health Organization has classified novel coronavirus disease, also known as COVID-19, as a pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. Utah County is currently listed as having a moderate level of coronavirus transmission as determined by the state's transmission index metrics. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the council chambers and other meeting rooms. Therefore, for the next 30 days, all meetings of the Provo City Planning Commission will be conducted entirely via electronic means. Meetings are broadcast live and available later on demand at youtube.com/user/Provo Channel 17 and at facebook.com/Provo Channel 17. Agendas and support materials are available at provo.org/planning commission. To make a public comment or to join a meeting via telephone, follow the instructions provided on public notices of each meeting. To send comments to the Provo City Planning Commission members or weigh in on current issues, email them to dspublichearings@provo.org. Signed by Dave Anderson, Planning Commission Chair, and Bill Pepperoni, Director of Development Services, on April 28th. All right, and our agenda today for the work meeting has just a discussion on regulations related to backyard chicken coops. We need to be prepared to finish up about 5:45. Hannah, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Let me just get my presentation on the right screen so I can share it with you. Right. So talking about chicken coop setbacks today, the distance to the property line. The point of the discussion today is just to find out if this is a discussion you even think that we should be having, and if so, what changes you think might be appropriate to the current requirement, which is 15 feet, as you can see here, between the property line and 6 feet between the coop and any dwelling. This is for residential zones and parcels whose primary use is just a single family occupancy. For a little bit of context, some residents raised this with Councillor Ellsworth a few months ago. Some of the questions they asked were things like, where can we put a trampoline? Since the chicken coop is pretty awkwardly spaced, you can see this is an R16 zone. It kind of puts it in the backyard, hypothetically. This is just a random example. If the city doesn't regulate dog houses like this, then why chicken coops? Isn't it more important that the coop be the right size than in the right place? And distance requirements make sense for sidewalks, but not necessarily backyards, which are more private. To my understanding, the distance being 15 feet was simply because, as we all know, chicken coops are not exactly tidy, pleasant smelling structures. And that was simply thought to be the most appropriate distance at the time. Councillor Ellsworth brought this to the council back in September. They voted 6-0 to send it to Planning Commission, which is how it got to you here. For a little bit of context, here's another map showing some other hypothetical structures with the current distance requirements in code. For pools, it's 5 feet. Coops, you see there, are 15 feet. Most other accessory dwellings are 3 feet. Talking to animal control about this, they didn't have any concerns about the 15-foot distance or any other recommendations. They said the complaints that they get aren't even really about distance between them and a neighbor's chicken coop in the backyard, but about the number of chickens that people have. They've asked for that to be stressed more clearly, since it seems like chicken over occupancy is more of the problem. Yeah, just
why somebody would want more than 6 chickens is beyond me. I have no idea.
In a residential zone, yeah. Yeah, just based on lot size, it varies between 2 to 6.
That 6 per square foot or 6 total?
Oh, 6 total. Yeah, if your lot size meets a certain threshold, you can have up to 6, but it doesn't go beyond 6 no matter the property size.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
If I have on my farm down there with 30 acres, do I only have 6?
You get to have as many as you want because you're an ag area.
Yeah, this is just for areas zoned residential.
So it's just certain zones.
Yeah, so this is just residential zones. Yeah.
Yeah, this is only residential, single-family use sorts of zones. I took a look at what other cities have done. Their requirements vary from 3 feet to 15 feet. That's Provo there at the end on the more conservative side with 15 feet. You will notice that those that have shorter distance requirements, 3 to 5 feet, tend to have other requirements requiring a certain distance from neighboring structures or properties on a neighbor's property. So even though they can be within 5 feet of the fence, they can't be so close to other neighboring dwellings or structures like that. There are some cities, you'll see like Mapleton here and Spanish Fork, that don't really distinguish too much between coops and other accessory structures as far as setbacks, with the exception of those additional distance requirements, which is an option for Provo if that's something that you thought appropriate to consider. That's essentially the end of the information I have to give, but I'm happy to answer any other questions that help you feel like you might understand this better. But is this a discussion that you even want to have? Should the distance be changed from 15 feet? If so, what to? How should they be treated vis-a-vis other accessory structures, if that's a route you want to take? And are there other requirements like distances from neighboring buildings that you think would be appropriate?
Thank you, Hannah. And I'm wondering, do you have any statistics on how frequent complaints are submitted about chicken coops? Is this a frequent issue?
To my understanding, it's not very frequent. I don't have specific numbers. This is a really busy season for animal control.
I think, again, the majority of complaints come from the number of animals rather than the location of where they're sleeping.
Right. I'm just thinking about chickens, period. How many complaints do they get? Okay. Commissioners, do we have questions, comments?
This is Russell. I just wondered, they're not allowed to have roosters, is that right? Just hens?
Yes, that's correct.
Lisa Jensen?
Hannah, could you go back to the previous slide?
Of course.
The one that showed the different, I was just looking at this going, if we talked about maybe changing something, how would we approach it? And I'm wondering what you think. Obviously, this is just an assumption, but why do you think that they have a certain distance from residential structures? Like I'm thinking a shed, right? Is that because of a fire hazard that you would have to have your shed a certain distance away from something else, or even from your house in another zoning code? Or,
To my understanding, there's not a huge risk of fire or anything like that with chicken coops. Apart from heating lamps, there tend not to be much by way of electronics. I think it's mostly for smell. And
Because what
noise.
I'm thinking is if we had an ordinance like Spanish Forks where we said you can have a chicken coop within 5 feet of your property line, but it has to be 25 feet away from any structures. Well, actually, I'd rather have my neighbor's chicken coop behind a shed than I would like to have it behind my fence, because the likelihood of somebody getting close to their property line. I'm just thinking out loud about the variableness of these measurements and what that would mean and what we would want to.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Spanish Fork does specify that it has to be a residential structure. Mapleton does not. So if that's something that you wanted to finesse with wording, that's absolutely possible.
So residential structure would mean a home specifically.
Or a garage or some living space, I imagine, that's attached to the house, not a separate one. That's how I would interpret that. But I just was thinking aloud about whether it mattered to have it specified as residential or not, because I don't have a problem with a chicken coop being close to a shed or a swimming pool if that's what they want to have. But anyway, I'm just thinking out loud about what those variations of wording might mean if we were to alter anything. So thank you.
Okay. Yes, Deborah Jensen.
Thanks. I'm just really thinking about the setback from the property line. For example, a backyard fence is typically 6 feet, right, in height. So a shed or a coop is going to be much higher than that. And I actually have a situation in my neighborhood where someone built a accessory structure. It's really more of like a playhouse for kids, but it's at least 15 feet tall and it's 3 feet from the fence. And it's a serious eyesore for myself, the neighbors beside me on either side. So I really think 5 feet or 3 feet is inadequate. That's just my opinion. I was surprised when I found out that they could build that close to the property line, a shed or accessory structure.
And in your case, Deborah, that the 3 feet from the property line is okay, but within 10 feet of the property line, they shouldn't exceed 12 feet in height.
Oh.
So it sounds like it might be a violation.
Sounds like it. The other thing I will say is that if we're going to enact legislation to regulate things like coops, then we also need to make sure it's not just something on the books that'll be enforced. Because I have an elderly neighbor who's in her 80s and not well, and her next door neighbor built a chicken coop attached to the fence, and she was very upset, but she's an older woman and she will not complain about anything. So, people are doing things like that. But if it's not enforced, then, it's on the books, but it doesn't help people. So that's just my opinion on that.
We have
Okay.
restrictions on digging.
Thank you. Councillor Ellsworth?
Yeah, I was just going to address something that Deborah mentioned, which is the citizen who brought this to my attention, who wanted to have a legally complying chicken coop, was told that, oh, the city doesn't really monitor these things. You're probably not going to get a citation. And that may be the case, is that we just don't enforce this until it becomes an issue. So that's another consideration you may want to mull over, is, do we want an ordinance that we're not going to or rarely enforce? The two people I know who own chickens, two families, they both have them within 12 inches of their property line. So if that's helpful information.
It is. Do we have, what regulation do we have for just general nuisances? And are odors included in that?
I'd have to look into that a little bit more specifically. Robert, do you know off the top of your head?
Generally,
I think we lost Robert.
Oh, sorry.
Can
There
you
go.
hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm in the same room, just on my own video. So we do have ordinances that limit nuisances like odors, noise, things like that. It has to be controlled at the property line. But I want to kind of piggyback off to something that Deborah said, and that is our enforcement is definitely in play, and we enforce the laws that we have, but our enforcement is based on complaints, right? So in Deborah's example, I think that is so classic that lots of times you have neighbors that might be bothered by something that's going on that we could actually enforce on, but if we don't know about it, then we have no way of being able to help that situation out, right? So I don't think it's necessarily a matter that we're not enforcing our laws. It's just that the methods that we have to understand and know about things that are going on, sometimes we just don't know what's going on.
I understand that. Okay. What do you think, commissioners? Is this something that, I mean, I agree with both Lisa and Deborah that if it is, if it's not really actively enforced, or if there's not a compliance mechanism that actually gets used, then I'm not sure what the value is of that kind of a setback or of a regulation. But I also kind of like the idea of at least having some distance between a fence. I'd be happy with making it just a regular accessory and also making some sort of notice of the nuisance aspect of it more than the setback. But what do other people think? Lisa?
I think 15 feet is excessive, and I like your idea, Laurie, of having it be more in alignment with the other similar regulations. So accessory structures can't be a certain height, or if they are, they have to be a certain distance. So kind of a step back approach. And then to point, so maybe there's something in there that talks specifically about chickens, but it will refer back to the same standards that are already in place. And then the nuisance standard would be the ruling for the noise or the smell. That would, if it's a violation, it's a violation one way or the other. Just less specific. I keep thinking about the discussion we had several months ago about trailers and recreational vehicles, and how this is a very similar thing where if your neighbor doesn't like that you have one of these things, then you're going to be the one that has the enforcement. Or if you know it's a rule on the books, then you're going to be the person that does it. I think I've talked to the same person that Counselor Ellsworth talked to. And, you know, these are people who are actually aware of the rules and are trying to comply with them, just like the people who built concrete pads for their trailers to park them behind the front line of their house are people who are aware of the rules and are trying to comply with them. But 80% of the population of Provo is not aware of the rules unless someone rats on them or complains about them. And so you have a greater percentage of violations from ignorant people, meaning they were not informed, than you have from people who know the rules. And so it's just this, you start enforcing it and it's an uproar of you're taking away my rights and you have no right to tell me what to do with my property. So it feels like that same discussion like we had with the trailers where I like that rule. I think it makes Provo look nicer, and I think it's a nicer neighborly thing to do, to have these guidelines that tell us what's polite to do with our property. But not enforcing it is just, what's the point? If we don't have something that's enforceable or equitable to all these people who've invested money to do it the right way versus all the people who never asked and therefore weren't guilty. So those are some thoughts. I didn't give you any solutions there, but those are some things I'm bouncing around.
Yeah, good points. And I think that there's an educational issue here that I don't know how you convey some of these regulations. Deborah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how we convey these regulations. I mean, there are a lot of regulations that cover how our neighborhoods look and feel and are intended to prevent things like trash cans sitting in the street all week and trailers parked in front of a house for a month, all those kinds of kind of annoying things. And this would fall into that category. And maybe what we need to do is pick a topic, and Provo is really big on using social media. They have a Facebook group, or the mayor does. They have the email blasts that go out. And of course, not everybody is subscribed, but we also have utility bills that go out that always have a little newsletter. So maybe you could just strategize how you could pick a topic for the month. Like for this month, it's chicken coops. Do you know that chicken coops must be blah, blah, blah? And just kind of, at least try to inform the public of what regulations are, and that it's about being a good neighbor.
Yes, I agree with that. Very much so. And maybe there's just a little, what are the rules blurb in some type of a publication or electronic communication that goes out. Because if people don't know what the regulations are, obviously they're not going to follow them. I'm, probably the neighbors who built the playhouse didn't have any idea how tall it was allowed to be, all of those kinds of things. And the other question is how easy is it to make a complaint, and how can that be done confidentially? Because there are a couple places in my neighborhood. I don't really want to say, I don't want them to hear that I complained, but there are a couple of things that bug me that if I had a confidential way of just saying, these people have not taken care of their lawn in the last 6 years. And Deborah probably knows what house I'm talking about. But at the same time, I don't want to have any conflicts there. So even being on the planning commission, I don't know what the procedure is. Lisa.
I was thinking even bigger than that. In the past, I've met with zoning enforcement to just sort of talk about how can we nip this in the bud by helping people to understand what the rules are so that they're accountable to them, instead of, because it's unrealistic to go door to door and say you're in violation, you're in violation. It's also unrealistic to make neighbors rat on each other, because after a while, especially in stable neighborhoods where you've been here for a long time, you're just like, forget it. I'm not going to be the one that's the informant. Or, either telling them what the rules are or telling someone that the rules are getting broken. That's just not neighborly. And so it's a budget friendly system, but it's not a neighborhood friendly system. And Provo is a neighborhood friendly place. And so it's kind of counterintuitive to have this system of, we only enforce our laws if we rat on each other, but be nice to each other and overlook your faults and be friendly and neighborly. I don't think there's a better way to do that. It's just the way it is. But one thing I've thought about is, because Utah County's tax records, property records are all public records, how hard would it be to come up with a computer program that every time there's a closing document filed on a property, that Provo City can auto-generate either an email that goes out to the email contact information of the property owner, or a letter to the property owner saying, welcome to Provo. Even if they just moved from the next block over, it's just standard procedure to say, welcome to Provo. Here's some common rules. We love our neighborhoods. We want our neighborhoods to be great places. Here's some common infractions that you might not know about. Please make sure that as you move into this new neighborhood that because then if you're going to rent it out and you don't know about the rules of rentals and what zones they're allowed in and what that means and how many people, you've got that all out on the table, and every single person who's a violator is now accountable because they received the information, except for the poor renters who get stuck in the transaction. But chicken coops. Welcome to Provo. You're going to build a chicken coop. Here you go. You know, like if you just had some of these little basics, shovel your sidewalk, bring in your trash cans, make sure your lawns aren't a weed abatement problem, make sure that your shrubs are trimmed back from your driveway, then it benefits Provo and it benefits neighbors because we're coming in on the same understanding instead of an antagonistic thing. But I don't know how logistically possible that is.
Yeah. Any feedback from city staff on that?
I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm not exactly sure how we could implement that, but it's definitely something that we could come up with, because really we're talking about the HOA ordinances of our ordinance, right? Like there are certain things that are building and you know, life safety stuff, but the things that we're really talking about here are more HOA style, and providing a way for people to access that information and to be aware of it. I think, yeah, we could definitely utilize some of the outlets that we have to disseminate that information. Hopefully soon we'll also be able to start Provology. We've had quite a bit of success with that in the past. Kind of gives people an opportunity to really understand what goes on in the city, understand some of the things that we do here, and that's something that we could kind of rely on as well.
Okay. Deborah.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to Lisa's idea, which I love. If we can't use Utah tax records, we could certainly use Provo utility records.
Yeah, the
Because
utility.
whenever a new resident arrives, what do they have to do? They have to sign up for electric, trash, water, and, you know, all of those good things. So you would have a point of contact in that way.
Yeah. Kind of send them a welcome packet.
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't know it, but you joined this HOA.
Welcome to Provo. We love you, but this is what you can do.
This is what you get.
Don't build a chicken coop right there.
I'll just add, some municipalities do actually have a crew that go out and look for code violations. And they are, boy, they're tough about it too. If they drive by and your fence is sitting right up against the sidewalk and that is not allowed, they will require you to move it at your expense. They don't wait for somebody to call. They go out and look for it. And it earns money for the city as well, because, you know, they have to get a permit then.
Yeah. So, okay. Getting back to the specific question that came before us, do we see a need to have a specific regulation for chicken coops versus things like big dog houses or sheds or other kinds of things?
Yeah, and Lori, let me tag on to that a little bit of, does the Planning Commission see a need to change the current requirement of 15 feet? So if we kind of answer that question, and staff doesn't have an opinion one way or the other on this one. Like we want to give you the opportunity to function as a planning body and just really think about that and say, okay, Provo has a requirement of 15 feet. Do you feel like that needs to change? Do you feel like there are circumstances that should change, or do you feel comfortable with that? And if you feel comfortable with that, then we can just leave it the way it is. But if you do feel it should change, then the next step would be to what?
In policy analysis, the first option is always to maintain the status quo. And that's absolutely a choice that you have.
Okay. Lisa.
I can appreciate that maintaining status quo would be the easiest, but I feel like if we have absolutely no intention of enforcing a 15-foot setback requirement, like that citizen was told, you know, no one's going to enforce this, so you don't need to worry about it, then we need to change the rules that are in the books. If we do not feel like we have the ability to enforce something, it shouldn't be there. You know, I know that there's some of these other things that we've talked about have been enforced and it made people mad or whatever. But if we really feel like 15 feet is excessive or not something to worry about, or then I feel like we would need to change something, maybe just to simplify, like Laurie was suggesting at the beginning, where it's more in line with other accessory structures and is tied to a nuisance ordinance. Because if no one is ever going to respond to that by making someone tear it out and then maybe following up with others that have done the same thing, then it feels like it's sending the wrong message about how serious we are about our HOA requirements, as Robert would say.
Yeah. Okay. I think 15 feet's kind of a lot. And so I would think that a smaller amount would be good, but I'd like to hear from every member of the commission that's here. Russell, what do you think?
Honestly, I think we probably could to come into an agreement of lowering the 15 feet that we have at Provo. But I also think that this idea of having a chicken versus a trailer that's parked out, I think they're definitely different, because the trailer wouldn't bother me as much, but the chicken, if he continues to have an odor and a lot of noise, which they do, that would bother me. So I think there does have to be a setback that's possible to be used, and people should follow it. And I agree that as we've been reading these chat notes, the idea that we have laws and requirements on the books that are not being enforced, and we have to be a tattletale to get it done. But if we see that, that, like Deborah's neighbor, who's an elderly person who won't say anything, she's putting up with something that she shouldn't have to, and those neighbors should keep it clean and move it back to where it should be. So, but I think we should, 15 feet seems excessive to me, but, possibly move it in a little closer. But I think, again, just saying before that, the chickens are a different thing than a trailer being parked out in the front. It's, they're both violations, but the one could be much more annoying than the other, I think.
And I'm assuming that this is a requirement for a fixed structure. I'm thinking about dog houses, for example, and some of them are just, plastic things you put out there and they can be moved around, and others would maybe be fixed in some location. Is there a regulation for those other than the accessory structure regulation?
Not to my knowledge, but I could look into that. But
Okay.
They, again, like with trailers, have different environmental impacts than chickens do with the noise and smell.
Right. Okay. So let's see. Looking to see who else is there. Dave, I don't know if you have been, how long you've been here. I didn't see when you came in, but do you have an opinion on this?
No, I really don't. Maybe the only thing that I'd add is that it seems like it's maybe about 10 years ago that urban chickens and things like that seemed to kind of come into vogue, and cities started to adopt regulations like what we're talking about tonight. And that I'm aware of, just like for my day job, we really haven't had many complaints at all about people keeping chickens and that type of a thing. There are many dozens of homes in the community that I work for that keep chickens. So it's been, I think, less of a big deal than we maybe thought it was back then initially. But I really don't, relative to 15 feet or less or things like that, I really don't have an opinion.
Okay. I'm kind of getting the consensus that we think that maybe the distance is too much. And maybe we don't need a specific regulation at all. That might be something to have the staff investigating. And and maybe do some checking on, number of complaints, types of complaints. Because I think it's a good question. I'm just not sure where to go.
Yeah, we can do that as staff. We can look a little bit more into the details and make a recommendation on a new potential distance or any additional requirements.
That's probably a good idea. Does anyone disagree with that course of action? Don't really want to say a formal vote, but it's a work meeting. Any other comments or questions on this? Okay. I think that could conclude the work meeting. It's a little bit early, but if there's no other business, then we would just come back at 6 o'clock. Shannon, come in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if the Planning Commission has any other ordinances that come to mind that don't seem to be totally thought through or might need some updates or tweaking, don't hesitate to be proactive about bringing those to Robert or Hannah or myself.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's finish the work meeting and people come back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
The recording has stopped.
The May 26,
This meeting is being
2021
recorded.
Provo City Planning Commission meeting. We're going to start tonight with me reading a statement relative to the Open and Public Meetings Act. In accordance with Utah's Open and Public Meetings Act, I have determined that conducting meetings of the Provo City Planning Commission with an anchor location such as the council chambers presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which I have made this determination. The World Health Organization has classified novel coronavirus disease as a pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. Utah County is currently listed as having a moderate level of coronavirus transmission as determined by the state's transmission index metrics. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the council chambers and other meeting rooms. Therefore, for the next 30 days, all meetings of the Provo City Planning Commission will be conducted entirely via electronic means. Meetings are broadcast live and available later on demand at youtube.com/user/Provo Channel 17 and at facebook.com/Provo Channel 17. Agendas and support materials are available at provo.org/planning commission. To make a public comment or to join a meeting via telephone, follow the instructions provided on public notices of each meeting. To send comments to the Provo City Planning Commission members or weigh in on current issues, email them at dspublichearings@provo.org. We just have 2 items, I believe, on the agenda for tonight. Originally planned on 5, it looks like, but 3 of those have been continued. We are missing a few of our members, as I understand it, and sure hope that Allie Jones, Brian Henry, and Lori Urquiaga are doing something fun. We'll miss all of them. And with that, let's go ahead and just take roll. Deborah, can you start us off?
Sure. Deborah Jensen, no conflicts.
Russ?
Yeah, Russell Phillips, no conflicts.
Thank you. Lisa?
Lisa Jensen, no conflicts.
Daniel?
Daniel Gonzalez, no conflicts.
Robert?
Robert Knudsen, no conflicts.
And I'm Dave Anderson. I have no conflicts. And just to dive right in, Mr. Ardmore, we're good to read in 1 and 2 together, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Mark Bond requests, this is item 1, Mark Bond requests concept plan approval for a 2-lot residential subdivision located at 790 West, 500 South in a proposed very low density residential zone. Item number 2, Mark Bond requests a zone map amendment from R1.6A to very low density residential located at 790 West, 500 South to create 2 single-family building lots. Mr. Ardmore.
Thank you. So this first slide just kind of gives you the current conditions. So here we are in the Franklin neighborhood. The property is highlighted to the south of it, 500 South, to the west of it, 800 West. It's right now on the property is a single family dwelling. The roof you can see there. Behind it, kind of in the shadow, is a garage. It's sitting on 0.26 acres, which is about 11,000 square feet. The applicant desires to split the lot to create 2 building lots for 2 single family homes. With the zoning being R16, he's just short of being able to do that. So the zone that would work for that, next one up, is the VLDR, which only requires 5,000 square foot per lot instead of 6,000 square foot. So he's proposing the VLDR lot or VLDR zone to produce 2 single family lots. The general plan for the area is residential, so he's staying in line with that. The Franklin Neighborhood Plan Future Land Use Map designates this area as single family residential. So he's proposing to stay in line with that as well. Side note, the applicant is also the owner of this property who zoned that to the low density residential zone to kind of preserve the historic home there and to add a second unit to that property. And if any of you have driven past that, it is very well done. So pretty happy with that product there. The concept plan that is proposed with this zone change is shown on the screen here. The lot split kind of down the middle of the lot. The existing home goes away, but the existing garage stays. The two new homes would be sited similar to this, meeting the setbacks of the new VLDR zone, if approved, giving plenty of room for parking for both of the lots. The existing garage would stay to provide parking for the home to the north. It also helps to limit demo costs, and I think the applicant could speak to this, but I think he would also be re-skinning the garage to kind of match the architecture for the buildings that he has planned out. But 2 5,000 square foot lots is the concept. Not too complicated of a rezone request. Staff reviewed this. It really does meet the purposes of the zone. These central neighborhoods, this is what they envisioned, kind of meeting the characteristics of the neighborhood while providing new housing that matches the neighborhood. I think that it really does meet the goals of the general plan. So staff is recommending approval on the zone change and the concept plan.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Ardmore? Don't see any hands, so we'll ask the applicant, Mr. Is it Boud?
Boud, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to what Aaron shared?
No, thank you, Aaron. Just that I love the Franklin district. I love those old homes. And my purpose is to create 2 homes that look historic in nature. And if you're interested, the pattern that I'm using is a home at 462 West, 200 South in the Franklin district, which I think is the prettiest pioneer home in the area. And then there's right across the street, my own property, 713 West, 500 South. I'm using that little pioneer home for a template as well. So that they'll look historic. They'll be very well built, and it'll make for a beautiful statement in that area.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Boud? Commissioner Jensen, Lisa.
Is there a front view of the house that's going to be torn down, just to determine if there's any historic loss there?
Yes, I can. If I can show my screen, I'll give you a shot of that. Is there a way for me to do that? Let's see. Share screen.
There isn't, but maybe I can pull that up while you guys look.
Maybe I just need to look on Google Street View and find it.
Yeah, you could. That's what I was going to do, Lisa. So if you want to just do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a home. It's a stucco home that was built in the 1930s on a slab, on a cement slab that has all kinds of problems associated with it. It does not look historic.
Okay.
And my feeling it wasn't salvageable.
Okay.
Not anything like what I had across the street. But once you see Aaron's photo of it, hopefully you'll agree with that. It's not a pretty home.
They just said that, Mark, you can share your screen.
Oh, great. Let's see. How can I?
Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, so I'm going to share this screen. So this is not it. This is my inspiration for what I'm building at 462 West, 200 South. And let me actually share with you what the current condition is. At 790 West, 500 South, if you can see that white off-white house with a trailer and a car in the garage. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to keep this garage, and I'm going to convert that into what looks like a barn. I'm going to cover that with barnwood, somewhat similar to what I did across the street, and make it look like a really cool little barn. And then these two homes that will be built, I'll tear down the stucco home, and they'll be, the inspiration for that is kind of, let's see, what I did across the street, the before and the after pictures. The after picture is a little bit like what I'll do. And again, at home. This is kind of my main inspiration for it. I have that same front porch. I'm going to use a brick veneer, build it out of a really highly insulated cement product. And it'll be beautiful. But this is kind of the inspiration that I'm using.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
You bet. You bet. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I've got one. I'm sorry, Dave. I don't have a hand that I can raise.
Hey, no problem.
From the plot plan, it looked like the two homes were sharing the same drive in the middle of the property line. Is that correct?
No, let me actually pull up the rendering.
So there's one
Go
drive
ahead.
here off of 500 South, and then the other drive is off 8th West.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one uses 500 South, and this one uses 800 West.
In between the homes, I have pavers amidst grass, but I'm not quite sure that that's how it'll end up. It'll be nice looking, but I just kind of wanted to break up the grass a little bit and put pavers in there. But the actual parking is off of 500 South for this south house, off of 800 West for the north house.
Any other questions of Mr. Boud? Okay, we'll go ahead and ask staff to help us open the public hearing.
There are no public callers at the moment. 30 seconds. No public comments.
Okay, thank you. We'll close the public hearing then and turn the discussion back to the commission.
Steve, ultimately, we're just trying to decide on it would be lot size are going to be 500 square feet less than what the new zoning is required. Is that correct?
Well, I should comment. So one of the lots will be over 6,000 square feet, and the other lot will be about 5,500 square feet. So just one lot will be 500 square feet short.
Thank you, Commissioner Deborah Jensen.
I just wanted to say that I think it's totally appropriate infill and rezoning kind of project for the Franklin neighborhood. It meets the city's goal of increasing the housing stock and reinvesting in existing neighborhoods. And I think it will be an asset. I would support it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisa Jensen?
I agree with Deborah, though I had a couple questions, and maybe this is just for us to discuss as we get ready to maybe make a motion. I always just like to throw out there, we are rezoning a small parcel and a large parcel. Is that messy? Is that patchwork? It feels haphazard to me every time we do it. I'm always worried that it opens a can of worms. Even when the underlying uses look good and orderly at ground level, on paper, it tends to look like you can do whatever you want as long as you ask permission first. And so I'm just throwing that out there. I totally agree. This is beautiful. I agree that it's in, it complies with the goals of the general plan and the surrounding neighborhood. Along with that, I just wondered about how we ensure that it gets built as single family. I think, Mr. Boud, that you have all the greatest of intentions to do exactly what you proposed to us. But if the use or the ownership changed, or for some reason, with a VLDR zoning, you could build something besides 2 single family homes here that would maybe be more profitable to a developer. So how do we as a commission ensure that more lucrative possibilities aren't opened up by a zone change? And that being said, if they want single family homes to be in the Franklin neighborhood as part of the general plan verbiage, then does a VLDR or an LDR zoning maybe conflict with that a little bit, because we're just going on a good faith concept plan approval? So that's more like, I don't know if staff weighs in on that and says, Lisa, quit worrying about this, or if we discuss amongst ourselves each time. But those are just the things that I just want to make sure we consider with each of these projects, because some of them are fantastic and some of them are just so. This happens to be a fantastic idea as far as what's been presented to us, but are we really in compliance with something that could possibly not be single family if it changed hands? So there you go. Maybe that was so many words that you stopped listening to me a long time ago.
I think that was very helpful. Aaron Ardmore, can you maybe help us understand how you view this changing maybe the situation for the block or the neighborhood in terms of other uses, and like what assurance the city would have of the plan that we're seeing tonight actually happening?
So let me address the first question first. I don't think staff does have any issue with these smaller zone changes. We've done a number of them now, and I think they work really well for infill. The spot zoning concern is not a concern that this planning staff seems to have. But the VLDR zone, I was just going through our code to see what the lot standards were for different uses. So with this all being one parcel currently, if the zone change was approved and the subdivision didn't happen right away, technically the property owner or a future property owner could come in and propose one family attached. They could propose townhomes with a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet, which this property does have. So if that is a concern of the Planning Commission and or the council, there could be some kind of guarantee from the owner that could mitigate that concern. So that could be a discussion point at this meeting or the council meeting. But that is a fair concern.
I'll just add that with the VLDR zoning and 2 lots, one at a little bit more than 6,000, one a little bit more than 5,500. If my understanding is correct, I don't think I could do, or anyone could do attached, because both of those lots would be under 10,000 square feet. So
well, I'm sorry, what I'm saying is the subdivision hasn't occurred yet. So if the council approves the zone change and the subdivision has not yet occurred, anybody could come back the day after the council approves the zone change and propose townhomes on the lot that exists, because the subdivision of land has not occurred. So if that's a concern, then I think it's a valid concern.
I just so you know what my plans are, I do plan to construct immediately. I have the financing in place, and we hope to actually begin construction as soon as permits are pulled within the next couple of months. So you will see activity on here immediately. I have a little bit of an incentive to do that because I'm trying to accommodate some of my 2 of my children in school who want to live here. So I'm anxious to get it built, and it is a valid concern. But hopefully, you have a little bit of trust in me based upon what I've done in the past with the city, where we worked hard to work with the city and make sure that we were in compliance on 713 West 500 South. I plan to do the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Boud. I hope you didn't think I was implying that you were the non-trustworthy person in the story. I just know that when we make map changes, it's never a perfect promise that it's going to be tied to the proposal that we saw. So I always want to just know what the backup plan is. So thank you.
You bet. Understood.
Thank you, Commissioner Deborah Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For Mr. Ardmore, what would you suggest the best policy to permit the zone change and guarantee that we have it divided into 2 lots that would prevent townhomes or other higher density construction? Could we tie the zone change approval to subdivision of the lot approval, or are those 2 completely separate processes?
The council could do that, I suppose. They could make that part of their action if they so chose. They could discuss that with the applicant at the council hearing and state their concern, if they so have this concern of it being able to be developed into townhomes, and see if there's some kind of guarantee that the applicant could offer them to mitigate that concern.
Okay. I was just trying to get a better understanding of what we would need to state in any motions we put forth this evening. Thank you.
Wait, Deborah, you have me thinking here, not to be a devil's advocate, but Aaron, help me with this. Let's say that the property was subdivided. Is there anything that would prevent the property owner from recombining the properties if they chose to do that? I mean, by right, it seems like they probably could even do that.
Sure.
So I'm not concerned about the issue in this case, but I think it's a great thing to give more thought to. I guess that's how I feel. Truly, so much comes with zoning that you really can't walk back from it once that's in place. So this is a perfect project in my opinion, so I don't want to detract at all from that. But again, just by way of policy and how we handle things relative to, again, granting zoning and trying to do what we can to ensure that things get built according to what we see when the zone change is considered. I think that's really important. Deborah?
Yeah, I just wonder if we could tie the rezoning to the concept plan. I don't hear any pushback on the concept plan. Just we're thinking, out of the box about what's potential down the line with a rezoning. So could the rezoning be tied to the concept plan that's being presented this evening? So, for example, we approve the concept plan and recommend approval of rezoning based upon the concept plan. Does that work, Mr. Ardmore?
In past rezonings, there's been development agreements attached to them that have those kinds of attachments, but those are proffered by the applicant. So that's probably all I can say to that.
That's just a guarantee that the developer or the applicant would offer to the city, not something the city would be asking of a developer.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that too.
Is that too cumbersome for staff to engage in a development agreement on this? It's a pretty simple project.
I would hope it's a one-pager by way of an agreement. I would think you could cover the pertinent. I doubt that it would be one page, but I think it could be pretty succinct. And I think you probably start to walk on thin ice when you start to get too creative about how you handle zone changes and things like that. And I've heard things discussed that I don't know if they work, but the idea that and maybe this is tied to a development agreement, that the zoning reverts if certain concepts aren't acted upon in a certain period of time or something like that. Aaron, I'd love to talk more about some of that type of stuff. That would make me feel a lot more comfortable, and maybe in some of the other situations that we find ourselves in when we're talking about zoning and specific concepts and that type of a thing. And if that's at all just kind of the intent with the typical development agreement approach, then maybe that's not really necessary. But
well, and we've received pretty clear direction from the council attorney to not engage in those talks until things are proffered from the applicant. So that's why you see me being kind of silent on it. So if those discussions come up, we're happy to engage in them, and we're happy to help through that process.
Commissioner Lisa Jensen.
I had one question for Mr. Boud, or maybe for our discussion, just looking at the site plan. Aaron, Mr. Ardmore, can you put that up on the screen?
Yes.
It just didn't look like the north lot had a very big yard, and I don't know if that's something we care about. When we approve something that gives smaller lot sizes, you end up with, do we feel like that's all house and not enough space around it, or are we good with what will end up with that lot size?
No, I had a chance to look at this for the required minimum setbacks for the zone, and it seemed to meet those, and I think we're pretty happy with that. You'll see similar lots through Franklin, Dixon, some of those central neighborhoods to these.
I'd be happy to make a motion, but maybe we want to talk about what it would sound like first. I want someone to hold my hand while I make a motion.
I think you're very capable of taking a stab at it, even if it's just conceptual. What do you have in mind?
Well, I think that we all love this plan, and we're probably all in agreement on wanting it to be recommended for approval and approved. I think that, let me just go for it, see what I do. You guys can correct my wording if we like it better. I would like to make a motion that we approve the concept plan of item number 1 for a 2-lot residential subdivision at 790 West 500 South in a proposed very low density residential zone in the Franklin neighborhood. I would put a condition on that, maybe, that perhaps a development agreement that was suggested by Mr. Boud be include a promise to develop as the concept plan shows, so that we don't end up with higher density residential that wouldn't be in line with the character described by the general plan.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? So Deborah?
I don't have a second, but I have just a comment on the motion. I think that the concept plan motion to approve is fine, but the condition would be contingent upon approval of rezoning to VLDR. And then the VLDR item 2, the rezoning would then be contingent upon entering Mr. Boud's suggestion or statement that he would be willing to enter into a development agreement that would be tied to the concept plan presented this evening and approved.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and second the motion then. And for Lisa Jensen, are you comfortable considering an amendment to your condition?
Yes, I liked the way Deborah explained it. I feel like all she added, it seems like she restated it in more succinct language, but that she added the reminder that this is all conditional upon the zoning being approved. That was the major difference I heard. Yeah. So that's correct. I'm good with that.
So then I'm going to try to restate just that the motion is to approve item number 1, the approval of the concept plan for the 2-lot residential subdivision, subject to the also proposed zone change to VLDR being approved. Can it be that simple? Does that sound right?
Well,
yeah.
We added the condition of it being tied to the concept plan somehow. Deborah
So the DEA condition should be attached to the rezone motion, not the concept plan motion, I think is what was.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I understand. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Any other discussion on the motion?
Dave, you might need to restate it a third time because my confusion might make other people confused.
Well, let me see if I can say it the same way twice. So once again, the motion is to approve item number 1, the proposed concept plan for a 2-lot residential subdivision, subject to the condition that the proposed zone change to VLDR be approved. So from there, any other discussion on it? Excuse me, on item number 1? I don't see any hands, so back to the same order as before. Commissioner Deborah Jensen.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Phillips,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Lisa Jensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Knutson,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. 6 of us. The motion carries 6-0. And we'll move on to item number 2. Any other discussion on item number 2, or would somebody like to go ahead and make a motion? I'm glad people don't fight over this. Everybody's so courteous. That's
I feel like Deborah has the right words. She needs to just go for it.
All right. Happy to do so. Could we put the item up on the screen so I can read it though? I don't have a hard copy here. Okay. I will make a motion that item 2, Mark Boud requests a zone map amendment from R1.6A to very low density residential VLDR zone located at 790 West, 500 South to create 2 single family building lots contingent upon Mr. Boud's offer to enter into a development agreement that is linked to the approved concept plan presented this evening, item 1, that agrees to develop 2 single-family homes on the rezoned property.
okay. Thank you. We have a motion. Commissioner Lisa Jensen.
I'm happy to report that I have a comment and not a second, which is I think Deborah did not mention that we're recommending it for approval. I think that you started reading and never said what you were actually motioning to do.
Many apologies. That would be my motion on item 2 is to recommend approval to municipal council with the conditions as stated.
I'll second it since no one else is talking.
Okay, excellent. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? The 3 conditions were, 1, that the applicant is willing to enter into a development agreement, and tied to that is that the agreement would bind the applicant to the proposed concept plan that we're seeing tonight. What was the other one? I missed. There was a third kind of clause that you had there.
I think that was it.
Was that it? Okay.
Yes.
Maybe that's why I couldn't remember it. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion to recommend approval of item number 2, the proposed zoning map amendment from R16A to very low density residential, subject to the applicant entering into a development agreement that would tie to item number 1 on tonight's agenda, the proposed concept plan for the 2-lot residential subdivision? I don't see any hands, so once again, Commissioner Deborah Jensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips.
Aye.
Commissioner Lisa Jensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Knutson.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So once again, the motion carries 6-0. Do I have it right? Is that everything for tonight?
That's it.
Are there any other matters that we need to take any time to discuss? I don't see any hands.
I think we need to recognize Mr. Ardmore as being our biggest fan because he has come to more items in the last several meetings than anyone else. So thank you, Aaron, for your devotion to the Planning Commission.
I just can't stay away.
I know.
Thank you, Aaron. You're wonderful. I appreciate you working with me.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Boud.
Well, I think we're just down to one last thing. Certainly I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Was Commissioner Deborah Jensen,
Second.
Second that.
Commissioner Lisa Jensen, the two workhorses for tonight.
Yeah, thank you, men who aren't talking.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Thanks, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thank you. Good night,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank
See
you.
ya.